Hello, I'm Tim Loughton, Member of Parliament for East Worthing and Shoreham, and I thought it was time for a podcast to update the situation with GTR and Southern Rail, and it doesn't get any better. Now look, I've just come from a meeting with other MPs and Chris Gibb, who has been appointed as the project director to try and bring together Network Rail and GTR to see what more can be done to prevent some of the problems on the infrastructure, and I'll report back on that in a minute. But the three areas I just want to cover. The first is, of course, the big long-term infrastructure projects which have been causing problems, particularly at London Bridge. I think the train operators underestimated the impact of that over a longer term. That work, I've been to see it at London Bridge, is progressing well, and when that is finally sorted out, the system should work better. That undoubtedly has been responsible for some of the problems that we've had. But the second area is the ongoing problems with the infrastructure, and we know that at the base of all this is the fact that the railway lines in the south between Brighton and London, and these heavily used railway lines, were effectively built in the 1930s and have not had the proper investment to upgrade them to keep pace with the demand with new technology and everything ever since, and that's why we keep having these recurring problems. And it's not good enough for a very busy, very important and very expensive to the travelling public main line in the southeast. Now, I have apportioned blame for all these problems that we've been having over recent months, many months now, down to the Department of Transport and to the train operator GTR at Southern and to the unions, and I'll come on to the third element, which is the union dispute, in a minute. I have to say the new Secretary of State, Chris Crayling, has, I think, taken a much closer and urgent interest in this whole issue. It helps that he's a Surrey MP, so he's affected by our train service as well, and the new Rail Minister, Paul Maynard, has been much more hands-on. Now, I know a lot of people are saying, look, when is this all going to get sorted? The government really should be more proactive in this, and I've said that myself in the past, but I have seen evidence that those ministers, and the Rail Minister Paul Maynard was part of our meeting this morning, are showing a much greater proactivity in trying to get these things sorted out. So what the Secretary of State did was to announce this £20 million, which is not going to GTR Southern, as some people thought. It's effectively part of the Network Rail budget. It's being overseen by a project board led by Chris Gibb, who's highly respected, who's had a very successful career in the railway industry. He's been brought in, he's running this project board, and as from next week that project board will include a member of the travelling public who's been nominated by MPs as well, and a small board of people from the rail companies, Network Rail and others. What they are doing is using this £20 million, and he's doing a lot of research, and I take my hat off to him. He's been spending time, as I have done in the past, in the cab of trains, speaking to drivers, speaking to guards, speaking to passengers to try and get to the nub of exactly what the problems are. And he gave us a report this morning on some of the things which he has already found, where the trains do not operate very well in this part of the country, and they operate much better in other parts of the country. So what he's doing is focusing on the commuter peaks. Why is more not done when something goes wrong in the morning to make sure that by the evening rush things can be properly addressed? And there are things that could be done that are apparently not being done, and we need to bring Network Rail and GTR much closer together. What's become clear from this, there's not been as nearly effective joint working as should happen when you have problems on the railway. He's also suggested that the autumn timetable is adapted because they have challenges, what he described as vegetation management. I think we read for that leaves on the line. But again, these are sensible things, but can lead, they're small things, but they can lead to hold-ups, which then lead to a sort of big domino effect. He's also looking at the way they maintain the track and do better scheduled maintenance of the track. Really good example of this yesterday. There were overrunning engineering works on Tuesday morning, on the day when the strikes were supposed to start. And the result was chaos at Brighton station. All the services were suspended. Now that was not down to Southern in this case, it's down to Network Rail, their scheduled maintenance, and they weren't able to get bits of kit off the line in time for the morning service to start again. Well, why not? This wasn't a surprise bit of maintenance, this was a scheduled bit of maintenance, and we need to make sure that those gangs who go on overnight get their work done in time, and if they don't get the work done in time, then they will have to come back on another night, but all the equipment is cleared out of the way so that the train service can get running. He's already flagged up problems like that. He's also flagged up problems with the way the trains are maintained, and they could be done much more efficiently. He wants to get rid of all the old 442 rolling stock, which operate on the Brighton London line, are very inefficient anyway, so he's made recommendations there. So the upshot of what I'm saying is that the ongoing network maintenance problems that should have been addressed ages ago by better collaboration between Network Rail and by the train operators are now being flagged up very late in the day by Chris Gibb and this project team. They've initially got £20 million to try and do something about it. So for the medium to longer term, that was encouraging, and I just wanted to give an example of where, because the government has said we need to do this and have provided some money, redirected some money to do it, those things will happen. Now the third part of all this issue is of course the ongoing dispute. Notwithstanding all the problems there are with running a normal service in normal circumstances, the real problems over recent months has been this complete intransigent position between Southern and the RMT union over what's called driver-only operated trains. Now, I've been critical of both sides in the past. I think it's been handled very badly by the management. I don't think there's been a sense of urgency on behalf of the management, and the way the fine system works means that, frankly, Southern have not been hit in the pocket as much as they should be to spur them into action. And one thing I've been very critical about and really want to get to the bottom of is the way the compensation payments are made when the trains don't run on time, and the frankly shambolic way that customers still have to claim compensation, and the level of compensation you get after you've gone through so many different hoops is pretty derisory. So I've been calling, will continue to call, and I'm minded to bring forward a private members bill to overhaul the compensation system so that all compensation will go into a pot from which customers can then claim compensation much more easily. And if there's anything left in that pot, because we know a lot of the compensation is not actually claimed by passengers, they're so frustrated with the system, that should be set against reducing fares for passengers, and particularly for season ticket holders who are paying for a 365-day-a-year service and not getting anything like it at the moment. That's an issue I want to take forward. But in terms of the current union dispute, I have to say, I think that the RMT position is becoming absolutely ridiculous, and they appear to be entrenched and against settling at any point at all. The whole thing comes down to who should press the button to operate the doors on the train. Currently, at something like 40% of trains on our network, it's done by the driver only. Perfectly safely, all sorts of studies have shown there's not a safety issue. Indeed, most countries who have trains made by international companies like Siemens, those trains are now designed to be driver-only operated trains as far as the doors are, and they have to be adapted in this country so that the guard can play that role. Now, what GTR has suggested, again there's been a lot of misinformation about this, is that the conductor now should no longer have the role of operating the doors, but will remain as the second person on the train and will have more time to be dealing with passengers, checking fares, helping people with disabilities on and off trains, and other safety considerations, etc., etc. I think that is a perfectly sensible way ahead. For some reason, RMT just will not accept that. And this morning, we've had the latest set of talks, head-to-head between the chief of Southern and the head of the RMT union, and yet again it's broken down in acrimony. And all the time this goes on, it's the poor old passenger, of which I am one, and my staff, who have seen the problems that the train service is having at first hand, and I'm getting daily, all the MPs are, terrible stories of the consequences of people not having a reliable train service. So I know just how important and how shambolic this is. But frankly, what GTR is putting forward, I think, is perfectly acceptable, and it's time for RMT to come into the 21st century and accept that this is going to happen. Now, the latest we hear is that the GTR have issued new contracts, and that if the conductor staff don't sign those contracts, and effectively their employment will be terminated in a few months' time. And those new contracts reflect their change responsibilities. Now, we're hearing that RMT have recommended that their workers should accept those contracts, so I hope that there is some sign of a resolution and we can move forward. So what is extraordinary is that the RMT are carrying on with their unprecedented level of strikes, and we're in the middle of another train strike as I speak to you here today. But finally, I just want to set out GTR's 8-point plan of the changes they are making. They are saying that they will guarantee that every train currently operated with a conductor will continue to have either a traditional conductor or a second member of a board rostered on the train. Southern guarantees that traditional conductors will retain their current competence, and they'll guarantee that the second member of onboard employees will be trained to the normal safety competence level. So if anything goes wrong with the train, anything goes wrong with the driver, that second person on the train will be just as well qualified as the conductor was to be able to take over management of that situation. And effectively what they are saying to the existing conductors, there'll be no compulsory redundancies, no reduction in salary, no compulsory location moves, guaranteed above inflation pay rise for the next 2 years, an increase in what's called the existing shift premium to 20% over the next 3 years, and a promise to increase the number of backup employees as well. And yet the RMT again dismisses that out of hand. Frankly, we are all fed up with this. It's been disgraceful this has gone on for as long as it has. I think that GTR should have taken more definitive action before now. They have at long last. I hope RMT will see that that's the way things have got to go, and will call off the rest of this strike action. At the end of the day, we need an efficient, reliable rail service that is conveying many of my constituents and many other MPs affected throughout Sussex and South London and Surrey, conveying them to their place of work, whether it be in London or Brighton or along the coast, getting our kids and students to school in a safe and reliable way. I think these proposals do that. I call on RMT, they have made their point. Let's think about the passengers who've had a shambolic experience over many, many months, and it's time to get our railways back to normal. I'll post further updates as we go, but as I've said, we've just had another breakdown in talks. The strikes appear to be going ahead, but I hope these new contracts mean that the conductors will at last accept what does need to happen. As usual, if you've got queries and further questions, I've been getting daily emails from lots of people, which is why I've made this podcast. I made it, I'm sorry, go on rather a long time to give as much detail as possible. But I will of course try and answer as much as possible on the special Train Watch section on my website. Thank you for listening.